everybody. Welcome in. Just take a little time today to paint in some pebble shapes. It's been kind of hectic and busy. I've got a lot of people in our community that are definitely weathering literal storms. We've had some folks have surgeries and broken arms and all kinds of wild stuff. So feels to me like there's a lot of stress and pressure going on, and so that's a good time to share some art, make a little space for people to come in and chat, hang out. If you're catching this on replay, I hope you will leave a comment. Let me know what you're up to, what kind of art you're working on these days. Tell me a little bit about how you're taking care of yourself when times get stressful. I know one of the stresses I'm having today is trying to get a good solid internet connection. For whatever reason, it's just very busy. Maybe that storm. We probably got a lot of people reaching out to connect and let their loved ones know that they're doing okay, or that they're preparing to evacuate from areas that might be impacted by a hurricane. So I started filling in these little pebble shapes here yesterday, and I'm mixing up washes with just a little bit of a color variation so that the pebble shapes will have a variety of colors. I don't want them to look too uniform. I want it to look as though they were all washed down a river from some place up in the mountains. Maybe the pebbles started out as rocks or boulders up underneath glaciers. Maybe they were part of some basalt rock formation or a lava flow. And they got washed down miles and miles down a river, tumbling, and all their rough edges get smoothed out, just like the rough edges of any day can get smoothed out. I'm working my way around the composition, filling in a rock here, a rock there. And then I'm going to the wash and I'm just adjusting it with adding a little bit of a different pigment. I don't really want anything to jump out too much. Right now I've got a little Prussian blue I'm mixing in. To a mixture that already has a little bit of raw umber and sap green, yellow ochre. Nothing too artificial, nothing too flashy. Just looking for these little spaces and working with a number 1 round, pretty small brush. And I'm working the pigment, the water, very, very dilute watercolor paint. Not much pigment in it, actually. I'm working it in wet on dry. And taking care not to saturate the paper too much. I don't want the colors to make a run for it. Sometimes if you get things too wet, the paint will flow, and that's not the effect I want right now. My mind just really wants to put stuff in the lines, calm everything down, slow it down, take a little break from the hustle and the hassle. Then in the next steps, I might come in and adjust the colors if any of the rocks happen to look a little too uniform. Most of these shapes I've tried to get a pretty good distribution and not have too many of the adjacent have the same color wash. So it's off camera, but I've got a palette and I got a couple of different colorways working at each end of it. So it might look like my brush is coming in and gonna work a pebble right beside it, but it should be a little bit, just a slightly different color. So I started with this very light wash of a yellow ochre, and when I laid that in, I knew I was going to treat it as an underpainted layer. So the appearance right now is that there are these somewhat bright yellow pebbles here. They're pretty prominent. And at this stage, I'm just going to add layers of wash to tone that yellow down a little bit. Not that there aren't areas of yellow rocks in nature. There are. And I think these are just looking a little too sunny for drawing the eye a bit much. And I want these larger rocks to be the focal point. See, that just tones it back just a little bit. Just ever so slightly. It's one of the advantages of watercolor is that colors can be built up in layers. Earlier this afternoon, I added some tiny touches of red and some green. I was thinking about the beautiful jaspers that can be collected in Oregon, both along the riverbanks and especially at the coast. These wonderful shades of an amber yellow and reds and greens. And sometimes you'll even find a jasper pebble that's got 2 or 3 shades of different colors in it. got into a bit of pigment over there. Got that one a little bit dark. Oops, sorry, working right off screen. Just adding some dimension. Deepening the color a little bit on some of the pebbles that are they're a bit yellow. I'm getting really close to being finished with this particular painting. Oh, excuse me. Hang on, I'm gonna switch this around to the other side so we can get caught up on some of these other tricky spots. So my goal with this was to control the warmth of the color using cool colors to create the visual effect that drops some of these pebbles into into the background, and then relying on a very limited amount of warm colors, just little touches of the orange and an English red, which is a little bit like an Indian red. Nothing too really screamingly bright, just a little red pebble here and there. Maybe a warm green. I wanted the overall effect to be something that was very restful to look at. I certainly can get into the bright colored paints in the paint box, but sometimes it's just really healthy and it's relaxing to give the eyes something to look at that's in natural colors. Boy, excuse me. Sound like I had a bowl of frogs for lunch. Indigo, hello. I am good. How are you today? I can actually see you in the chat this time. Kind of been crazy around the community today. So a lot of stuff going on, so I was hoping to create a nice calm space for people to come and chat if they wanted and hang out for a minute, get their bearings after everything that's going on, going down, going around. I'm not going to call it drama because it's just life. People getting through the just standard stuff that life likes to toss out. Little weather, a little just a little change, a little going through the process. A little protest, as we do, right? Seemed last week was pretty quiet around good old SPTVville, and this week we've had hearings and lots of people out protesting. See some folks who were off doing other things that are back with a couple of new videos. I saw Cubs Champion 16 was back in Boston, giving them hell. And saw a little something from Mindy Willens. Good to see her back. Looks like she's out in my neck of the woods right now, up in Portland, Oregon. And down in California, and there are just court cases galore getting worked through, so stuff all around. Oh, it was, well, there's just been all kinds of stuff going on, Indigo. Serge Del Mar released a video saying that he was discussing his reasons for stepping down from the board of the SPT Foundation, so that was, you know, I always have ears for Serge, and always hoping for him to find peace and healing in his journey, he and Michael. It's probably just we sometimes underestimate what listening can do for folks. There was a couple of broken arms in the community. Liz Gale had a surgery to put her arm back together, and Bill McCoyne, who is someone who's often with us in chat, apparently he has a broken hand, and so sending out healing wishes to both of them. There's nothing that hurts quite like a broken bone, but boy, you turn a corner pretty quickly, and it starts to feel better pretty quickly. So I know both of them will be feeling better here in a couple weeks, but right now, that is probably sucking pretty hard. And there's just lots of protests going on. MD Media 18 is just busy as can be in Pasadena and the Los Angeles area. Just flyer teching it up. Eric Rader with Flyer Tech. It just seems like everywhere I turn, there's people just back out. I think we had a bit of a break at the temperatures had been a little bit hard on people, so now we've had a little bit of temperature drops in the fall, so people are able to get back out and carry on their protest work a little more safely. So that's a good thing. We don't need anybody having heat stroke or any kind of heat injury for this. You know, he was out moving around down to the Pasadena City Hall to make some requests for some body cam footage for his interactions with law enforcement. So he mentioned in chat that things seem to be going positively. So I am I am glad to hear that. Audit LA and Fat Grammy and Henri of no, I just completely blanked on his channel name. Something in engineering. He's on SPTV. Have been just appearing in person and calling in for the commissioners meeting and the public works meetings down in Los Angeles to ask for the politicians and commissioners to be accountable for, maybe just give some explanations for why in the world they would allow so much time to be for the L. Ron Hubbard Way to be closed off from the public use. And I mean, I can't even wrap my brain around having something that was closed off to the public for so long. I mean, I can understand a long weekend for a festival or something, but this weeks and months of denying the public access to the streets that the public are paying taxes on seems absolutely outrageous. And I'm just shocked that these commissioners don't seem to care. I don't really understand it. But the longer it goes on, the more I begin to think that there's really something dirty going on there. So, I mean, I've never seen a private entity like that be able to just take over a street and to exclude the public while they were doing it. I mean, just even to have a permit and be able to exclude the public from public land is just strikes me as very wrong, and I'm really shocked that the commissioners don't seem to think that there's anything wrong with that. Nutty. Ethics and engineering, that's what Henri's channel is. Took me a minute. I skipped my coffee today, so I'm strictly speaking, not supposed to be. Caffeinated beverages have been taken off my list of things that I can enjoy after my cardiac procedure, so. And every once in a while, I just get a hankering for a bit of coffee. There's really nothing that tastes like coffee. Very long at all before I used to be kind of a heavy coffee drinker. And then today I was like, behavior bandwagon. So I've been kind of dragging myself around this afternoon. Perfection is perfection is an impossible goal, but we just make an effort at trying to trying to do better. Just do a little bit better. That we can do. Hello, Goldie. Welcome in. It's funny, when I start one of these paintings and I've got all of these little pebble shapes, I think, oh, I'm never going to get all those painted. And then before you know it, everything's pretty well done. It's like a lot of things in life. You just have to do it one little piece at a time. Just keep working away, work your way through it. Adam Carmona. Now, usually, Adam, I know where you're going. That one just. Is that a Dune reference? You'll have to explain it, or I'll have to look it up later. Yeah, the Goldie says they have a list of the of things to watch. It was a busy week, and I was saying earlier that it felt like last week was a bit of a slack week, but then this week, boom. Um, I'll tell you, if you're an Eric Rader fan, his show today was excellent. He interviewed a person who had been a Scientologist up in Toronto and Vancouver, British Columbia, and that was an excellent show. So I would be sure and put that one on the watch list. The Thursdays at 2, he and Selfless Self do some interviews and do some deconstructing having been in a cult, and then there's a rebuilding process that has to follow that when one leaves any kind of a high control group, and it feels like a privilege to be watching Eric Rader as he's on this journey, and I just love how he's just moving himself down the road, but he's also got a hand stretched out for other people who are on that road, and I just think he's just doing a phenomenal job of his deconstruction, and so I think it's just going to be wonderful to keep him as he keeps moving along this path. Oh, yes, the granulating watercolors. That was the rabbit hole I went down a couple of weeks ago. And great fun. Oh my gosh. you guys ready for the show and tell part of the stream. So I was mixing some granulating black with some, I think I used both cobalt blue and ultramarine blue, and so I'm kind of new at using granulating watercolors just full force. I think most of the time before I probably was fighting the effects because I was trying to get a really smooth wash, and so I just dove into it to see all the cool, look at all those cool shapes that stuff makes. And really, uh, as soon as you start looking at this, then of course all of the feed comes just flooding through with all these tutorials for the Daniel Smith granulating watercolors that come, and they're just, if 15-20 bucks a tube, and they're fantastic. But I was curious about trying to get some of those effects with some of the stuff I have, since I am an old person sitting on a big treasure trove uh, of watercolors, and trying to use what I have. I've got like the proverbial lifetime supply of that stuff. So anyway, I just started into it, and I feel like, I'm pretty pleased with how this one is coming along. So I have a bit of advice. If you are struggling to find time, cut your water paper down. Work small. Go in these 4-inch or even these 3-inch squares. I think this one is 3 by 3.5. Yeah, 3 by 3.5. It doesn't take very much time, and you're very constrained, but in a good way, by the size. But I mean, look at all the colors I got on that one little piece of paper. So yeah, don't think you have to work on a big, you know, 18 by 12 or 12 by 9. That's a lot of watercolor paper to cover. Go ahead and just cut that stuff down and work smaller. And also, if you have one that's a bit of a disaster, and it's only just a little square of paper. So that's kind of I think a lower threshold to overcome to get back into it. And if you spend 45 minutes or an hour or half an hour or 15-20 minutes, you can make a lot of progress on it. So Adam, okay. Lunar black is highly granulating. I was cheating it a little bit. I don't have lunar black. I have a kind of a lower end ivory black that is actually pretty granulating, just because it's not super high quality. But that worked fairly well. And then anything that's got, when I say PB7 for the, okay, burnt, if you add a little burnt umber in, you've got the pigment BR7, which is brown number 7, and that's always going to be granulating. So yeah, and it shows up in burnt sienna, raw umber. It'll show up in all kinds of things. So if you can figure out anything in your stash that already has a little bit of something granulating, then you can cheat it that way too. So that's what I did. And then just for those blue undertones, I used a I used French ultramarine, which is a little bit almost more lavender cast to it. Yeah, exactly, Goldie. Goldie says she has, they have some cheaper paints that are accidental granulating from not being ground fine enough, right? So, I mean, that's just a quality it has. It's not good or bad unless you call it good or bad. So, no, don't stop blathering. I'm here for the art talk, and I'm here for Indian Bangladeshi history. It's all good. Okay, give me a second here. If I, um, yeah, if I miss something here in the chat, and oh hoo hoo, paint markers. Indigo's Insight says she rediscovered they. I'm sorry, didn't mean to gender you or misgender you, but um, yeah, I've heard of Ohuhu. One of the artists I follow um, did some. Oh, the Ohuhu sent him like a huge collection of all of the paint markers and all of the markers, and then he did some work with them on. I'll drop a link after I post this up. As I always go back and make the live streams public, and I'll throw a link to that. But he thought that like he gave him high marks, so yeah. Well, so Indigo says that the paints are interesting, and you haven't quite figured out how to use them, and that is you're not going to figure it out until you splash them on the paper. So, if I could write you a permission slip that said Indigo has permission to get out a piece of paper and some water and paint and play, I would do that for you. And you should definitely do it for yourself. You may not know what you want to paint, but I didn't miss the back of this paper, so it curled up pretty badly. Because I'm, I am not disciplined about taping my paper down, so that's okay. Just I'll just brutalize it a little bit afterwards. We'll get it into shape. But sometimes when you play a little bit, and I also do collages. I make a lot of collages, so to me this is not a waste of paper because I will cut it up and turn it into something else. But that's how you figure out what it's gonna do, and then you know this is just it looks really kind of messy and experimental here, but I will probably give this painting the same treatment I gave this one and just use a Pigma marker and sketch in some pebble shapes. And then I might try, I think what I'm, sometimes you look at it and you'll get a mental idea of where you need to go next. And since I have these cool gray black tones, I think what would look really interesting against that are rainbow colors. So maybe I'll paint in the pebbles using some pinks and blues and greens and lavenders and just like misty rainbow soap bubble kind of shades. Or, you know, maybe a monochrome field of just one hue of some sort or another. But yeah. Isn't that, yeah, I've been picking this up and looking at it, and every time I look at it, I think I see, and it's just two hues, but my brain is interpolating these shadows and lights to what almost looks like kind of misty lavender purples and a greenish color, and it's quite remarkable. And boy, it sure looked a mess when I was working on it, because I just took a big moppy brush and I did a big swash of what just like looked like plain muddy gray water. And then I used a smaller brush and I just dropped in some more pigmented bits while it was still wet. And as it dry, I kind of just sat and watched it dry down. And as it did, all of these little dendritic formations started to appear, and it was actually kind of a fun thing to just sit and space out on for a bit. I'm just having so much fun with this watercolor painting. I'd been in a different phase last year. I was doing a lot of baking, and which for me is creative too, and working on developing recipes for edibles. And I just needed to take a break from that and do something else that was creative. And so I hadn't worked in the watercolors in a while. They seemed like they were neglected, and unloved. So I got them out and started working with them, and here we are. Yeah. Yeah, playing. Should you use water? Okay. Um, so are you talking about the markers? Because if they're paint markers, the acrylic, and no, they don't. That would I don't I don't advise that. That seems like that would turn into a big mess. And the other markers are alcohol based, so could uh, you could come into them with some alcohol and get some interesting effects too. Yeah, because they're comparable to something like a Copic marker, so they're alcohol based. And if you have regular colored pencils, something like Prismacolor colored pencils, um, those work with alcohol markers quite beautifully. The alcohol in the marker dissolves the waxes in the colored pencil, and it blends it. So if you've got any just your standard plain old colored pencils, that with some alcohol markers is a little bit of fun. Yeah. Yeah, and water and alcohol, like alcohol inks with some spots of water, because the water comes in and it just forces the pigment back in the alcohol, and you get some real interesting effects. Here's just another one where I've used um, just plain water, I think, on this. So I'd done kind of a wet wash and just spread that around, and then came back in here. You see uh, where the water hits, it'll push the pigment out. So I think that's the speed I'm at right now. I'm sorry I don't have more advice for you on what to do. But you know, those paint markers, as far as I know, they pretty much go down and they dry pretty quickly, and they're not really reworkable because they're acrylic, so they dry permanently pretty quickly. So yeah, absolutely play with it, experiment, and yeah, and throw it up on it's really simple to make a community post. You just hit the little plus sign, and you can upload a picture and put a couple words about it. And I love to see the art show. So, where over here, over here, the goat and the camel. Yeah, there's always something going on. if I can find myself one. We have time, I'll do a little pebble outline, and there's always time to hang out and chat. I'll do a bit of that. All right, good. Ooh. That pen didn't have much ink. Let's try again. Oop, don't want brown. Just bought $12 worth of new pens, and you think I can get my hand on one that's nice and juicy? No. That's the way of it. And I opened the package and I thought, oh, I should put a mark on these so that I know which ones are new. And did I take time to do that? No. I'll do it next time. I'll never do it. I should think I might want to try a 5. I'm not liking the way the 3 is showing up there. So Adam, you're all over the place. Do you have any live streams this week that just knocked your socks off that we shouldn't miss, or? I always love a good recommendation. I say I kind of surprised myself. I found myself surprised, that's how I want to say that, when I tuned in and Matt MD Media was out doing some flyer tech. I came across that and I went, that's not Eric. And then I was delighted to see somebody else out there. I hope he didn't give himself too many blisters on his hand with that standard stapler. Okay. Adam's recommending the Power Lies to Paralyze shorts. Those are a can't miss. Alrighty. I'll take a look and throw a link in the comments afterwards then. It's just about the time I get to thinking that things are slowing down in the protests, and the tide changes and it starts to flow and everybody seems just hammering away at it, and I finally gotten to the point where I tell myself, oh, don't worry about it, they'll be back next week. And they certainly, the people that are out protesting on the street, they do work in these sort of like the tide coming in and out, or something. There's a natural flow to it that stop worrying about things coming to a halt. I don't think that this movement can be stopped at this point. There's too many people protesting in too many ways. So I do believe that we definitely change the way that things operate. I'm not quite up enough to think we'll just absolutely put a stop to all of the nonsense, but I think we will certainly educate people about the dangers of high control groups and cults. Sometimes I just wonder how it is that we still don't have the education in place to let every young person learn what a cult is so that they can look out for it and avoid it. I was a young person in the 1970s, and cults were they were a big topic of conversation. I know my family, my folks talked about them. I think we learned about them in school, and I just don't quite know how we've failed to educate people. So I think that's a pretty big. I think it's a pretty important thing that we can be doing now, is especially with the kids that are young adults heading to college. They're at that point in a human life where you're making new affiliations, looking to establish yourself as an adult and making new friends. And of course, like our social lives are much more active at that age too, and I think that makes us vulnerable to the romance scam or the honeypot of, oh, here's a young person who's attractive, and boy, they've got this youth group, and wouldn't you like to join? No, I don't know if I want to join, but I want to hang out with this attractive young person. So that is a tool that young people are really susceptible to. And we've certainly seen that be deployed. So yeah, dude, she's not into you. She just wants you to join her cult. And not to be sexist, because that works. That works other directions too. Boy, I can get off on a ramble, can't I? It is indeed. Adam Carmona, it's not a honeypot, it's a money pot. Run! Absolutely. She doesn't want your body, she wants your wallet. She wants your credit card. Yeah, when When I was in college, there was this very cute boy who was in something like Youth for Christ or Young Life or something that was a Christian youth group, and I don't know anything about whether or not they were a legitimate or a dangerous group. As far as I know, it was a relatively safe group. That boy just wooed me and wooed me. He just was. I said, no, I don't really want to go hang out and go to church, but he was convinced he could get young women to come to Jesus. But, I suspect at the end of the day that his preferred group to socialize with was probably young men, not young women. So I hope that he found his way to actual freedom, or Jesus, whichever made him happiest. But there are so many groups out recruiting all the time where we're just a new friend away from getting sucked into something. Alrighty. I think we'll wrap it up here. And I thank everybody for coming in and chatting and for your good recommendations and your time. I appreciate it. And I hope that you will all take some time in the next days to dig into those art supplies, or maybe just grab a pen or pencil and a piece of paper and just do a little doodling. And be kind to yourself. And make a little art, make a little joy, and we'll see you on the next live stream. Thanks again, everybody. I really appreciate you. Bye now.